What if everything you thought you knew about Elvis Presley's final wishes was wrong? Imagine this, March 2024, in Memphis. A construction crew is swinging sledgehammers, dust hanging in the air, when suddenly one blow doesn't sound right. It echoes differently. They break through the plaster and find not wires, not pipes, but a safe, sealed, silent, waiting for nearly half a century to be opened. And inside? A secret Elvis never meant to stay hidden. Not jewelry, not money. A will, dated 1976, signed, notarized, untouched. For a moment, everyone in that room must have felt time stop. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, speaking across decades from a steel box buried inside a law office wall. And what he had to say wasn't just shocking, it was devastating. Because this wasn't the will the world knew about. This one was older, rawer, more personal. It wasn't shaped by managers, lawyers, or ex-wives. It was Elvis, unfiltered, speaking as a man who had finally realized he was surrounded by betrayal. He wrote about people he no longer trusted. He wrote about his fear that those closest to him, people who smiled for the cameras, people the public thought loved him, might be plotting for themselves. He worried that Graceland, his sacred home, would be turned into a tourist attraction against his wishes. He worried his little girl, Lisa Marie, would be raised on money and manipulation instead of love and guidance. And he worried that the world would forget the man he was, swallowed by the empire others would build out of his name. Elvis saw it coming. That's the part that hurts. He wasn't oblivious. He wasn't blind. He knew. He took steps. He wrote everything down. He wanted to protect his music, his dignity, and above all, his daughter. And yet for nearly 50 years, no one knew this document existed. Someone hid it. Someone made sure the world only saw the will that benefited them. Which begs the question, who was protecting Elvis, and who was protecting themselves? Even his closest confidant, Harold Morrison, the lawyer who helped him draft this will in secrecy, didn't live to see its impact. Morrison died suddenly in 1978, just months after Elvis. Officially a heart attack. But now? Now that feels less like coincidence and more like part of a plan. And when you realize how close Priscilla stayed to his business empire after the divorce, how often her name shows up in records, how carefully she positioned herself as the guardian of his legacy, you start to wonder, was she preserving his memory or rewriting it? The truth is, this hidden will isn't just a stack of papers, it's Elvis's voice. It's him reaching across time to say, I saw the betrayal coming. I tried to stop it. Don't let them bury me twice. And once you hear that voice, once you see the provisions he made for the people who actually stood by him, the bodyguards, the musicians, the staff who fed him and loved him, it changes everything. The king left behind more than music. He left behind a warning. Now the only question is, what else have they kept from us? Imagine this, Harold Morrison, Elvis's quiet, loyal attorney, the one man who had seen the king at his most vulnerable, was thriving in early 1978. He was expanding his practice, signing new clients, and planning for the future. Friends described him as upbeat, energetic, with a clean bill of health. By every measure, life was opening up for him. And then, just like that, he was gone. A heart attack, they said, 42 years old. No history of heart trouble, no warning. But the timing was everything. Elvis had been dead barely 6 months, and questions about his estate were already bubbling up. Morrison was the one man who could have changed everything. He had the secret will. He had Elvis's trust. He had proof that the story being told to the world was a lie. And before he could speak, he was silenced. What followed didn't look like grief. Within days, Morrison's office was stripped. Not just files, not just active cases. Everything. Storage boxes. Personal notes. Even his belongings. His secretary, Dorothy Hayes, said it felt less like a family cleaning up after a tragedy and more like professionals conducting a sweep. And when investigators later traced the phone records, the pattern grew darker. In the weeks before his death, Morrison's office had received multiple calls from Elvis's legal team and from a line registered to Priscilla Presley. That wasn't all. His calendar showed a meeting scheduled for the very next day, EP estate matter. Next to it, a number linked to a private investigations firm specializing in document authentication. It looked like Morrison was preparing to make Elvis's secret will official. And then he was dead. Some people whispered it back then. A few even suspected foul play. But without evidence, it was dismissed. Just another tragedy surrounding Elvis's larger-than-life story. Only decades later, when the will was pulled from that hidden safe, did Morrison's warnings suddenly snap into focus. Warnings he had written in a letter to his brother describing surveillance, threats, even a break-in at his office. "If anything happens to me," he wrote, "contact the FBI. The documents in my office must be protected." The warning was ignored, and the conspiracy to erase Elvis's true wishes rolled forward. And what were those wishes? Above everything else, his daughter, Lisa Marie. Elvis saw what was coming for her. He knew what fame could do. He knew how money could twist people. So he built a plan, brick by brick, to shield her. A trust that released her inheritance, gradually supported education at 18, income at 25, full control at 35, when she'd be ready. He even set aside money for therapy and life coaching, recognizing that being his daughter would never be easy. He wanted her to see the world beyond Graceland, to experience life, not just live in his shadow. He wrote letters for her birthday, advice, encouragement meant to arrive year after year, so she'd always feel her father guiding her. But Lisa never saw those letters. She never got the trust. Instead, she inherited everything in one lump sum at 25, exactly as Elvis had feared. And we know what happened to addiction, financial struggles, heartbreak. The protections her father had built for her were buried with that will. And then there was Graceland, Elvis's sanctuary, his one safe place. In the secret will, he was clear, it was to remain private, forever. No tours, no ticket booths, no gift shops. He wanted it preserved exactly as it was, a family home, where Lisa could grow, where her children could laugh in the halls, where the Presley legacy would remain a living, breathing thing, not a spectacle. If money ran short, he allowed for it to be sold privately, but only as a residence, never a museum. Instead, within 5 years, Graceland was opened to tourists. Millions of strangers filed through his private spaces, his bedroom, his kitchen, his meditation garden. The sanctuary he fought to protect was turned into a stage, and according to phone logs and testimony, Priscilla knew his wishes. She knew, and chose to ignore them. When the secret will was authenticated in 2024, the world finally had to face what had been hidden. Forensic experts confirmed it beyond doubt. This wasn't a forgery. This wasn't a rumor. It was Elvis, speaking directly from 1976, and the implications were staggering. Lawyers called it one of the greatest estate frauds in American history. Staff and musicians who had once thought Elvis forgot them discovered he had remembered them generously and that their gifts had been stolen. Lawsuits exploded. Jerry Schilling, who Elvis had named guardian for Lisa Marie, became the loudest voice demanding the truth be honored. And investigators, re-examining Morrison's death with modern forensics, found traces of digitalis in his remains enough to induce cardiac arrest in a man with no heart disease. Suddenly, what had been written off as natural looked like murder. And so the story shifted. Elvis Presley, the man who gave the world everything, had his truest wishes stolen. His lawyer silenced. His daughter was left unprotected. His home was exploited. His legacy bent to the will of others. But now the truth is clawing its way back into the light. The king left a will. And it's nothing like the story we've been told. Picture this. After decades of silence, the king's voice comes roaring back, not through a song, not through a performance, but through a piece of paper that outlived him. Elvis's secret will. For years, it was hidden, buried, forgotten. But when it finally surfaced, it carried not just his signature, not just his words, it carried his vengeance. Because tucked deep inside that document was something no one expected. A trap. A legal time bomb Elvis himself had planted. He called it the Resurrection Clause. Think about that for a moment. Elvis Presley, the most scrutinized man in the world, knew betrayal was circling him. He knew people he loved might turn his death into a business. And so he laid down one last card, an instruction designed to spring to life if his true will was ever kept hidden, a sting operation from beyond the grave. And when the will was authenticated in 2024, the trap snapped shut. The clause demanded that anyone who had profited from suppressing his wishes would not only return the money, but pay triple damages. Compound interest. Inflation adjustments. 47 years of betrayal tallied up in cold numbers. For Priscilla, who had built her public identity and fortune as guardian of Elvis's legacy, it meant everything she had gained now stood to be stripped away. The bitter irony? She would have had more if she had simply honored his wishes from the start. But Elvis's plan wasn't just about punishment, it was about exposure. He demanded that once his secret will was uncovered, a list of everyone who had known about it be handed directly to law enforcement and the press. Harold Morrison, his lawyer, had even prepared detailed accounts of the threats he received before his suspicious death. Those records, locked away until now, became the smoking gun. And the impact? Immediate. Courts froze every asset tied to the Presley estate. Investigators reopened Morrison's case. Tours at Graceland were suspended. For the first time in nearly half a century, Elvis's home began to look less like a tourist trap and more like the sanctuary he had begged it to remain. His letters and private messages he had left behind were finally delivered to the people they were meant for. Some are filled with love, some are filled with grief, and some searing indictments for those who betrayed him. This wasn't just a will. It was Elvis Presley's final performance. A man who had been dismissed as paranoid, drug-addled, out of control, revealed instead as calculating, watchful, and heartbreakingly aware of how fragile trust really was. He knew what they would do to him, and he made sure his voice would rise again when the lies finally crumbled. Elvis may have left the stage in 1977, but with the Resurrection Clause, his last act wasn't silence. It was thundering. Now the question is yours. Did Elvis truly see this betrayal coming? Or was this his last desperate safeguard against a world he no longer trusted? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this story. Let his voice echo where others tried to bury it. Because if the king's secret proves anything, it's that sometimes the truth refuses to stay hidden.